Okay, before I start today's Teknoparrot setup guide, if you like what you see today, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. Gets you notifications every time I release a new video, which is every day, sometimes 3 times a day. So we're looking at Teknoparrot, and I last covered this going back in October 2023. And recently people have been moaning, saying that particular games aren't working, so I thought it's about time I updated it from my previous video. I'm also going to make you aware that for some games you do have to pay, and people will moan at that, but let's be honest, emulators are free. Most of your games that you download are free, so a few dollars a month isn't going to kill anyone, and you can, use that instead of buying a cup of coffee, shall we say, Starbucks or Costa. So let's take a look at the website itself. And the first thing I'm also going to mention before doing anything else is light gun support. Yes, Teknoparrot does do light gun support. I don't own a light gun, but if we go to get started, we'll go to light gun setup, and this will give you all the information for light gun setup. So it really isn't that difficult to do. As you can see, just calibrate your light gun and just do what it says on screen. So that's it. And also something else I want to go through is compatibility. If we take a look at the compatibility key at the top here, blue is perfect, green is great, amber is issues, red unplayable, and grey is unknown. In other words, particular games, which probably aren't too many, hasn't been tested and no one's reported on those yet. So the games then you really want to go for are going to be marked with a white tick in the blue circle, and there's a fair few of them there. And like I say, there is particular games where you will have to pay monthly, but it's not going to break the bank. So just take a look through this list and you can see what's what. Now, I would say the green circle just there with the white tick going through, they're probably 90-95% playable. They're not completely awful, and I've tested some of these. So what we're going to do then, now all that's been dealt with, is actually go to the download section. All we need to do is download the Teknoparrot web installer, TB Bootstrapper. So if we just left click on this one, and what I'd suggest doing is downloading the TB Bootstrapper. If you download the legacy release, it just means that we've got to download and install everything separately, and it's just a lot easier to use the blue option just there. It's just download this. And if we go back to the Teknoparrot website, recommended software is DirectX user runtimes. And it also requires Visual C++, redistributable runtimes all in one. I've already got these two installed on my computer, but I'm going to go through with it with you anyway. So DirectX, it's less than 100 megabytes download. Now, if you don't have DirectX, then you'll likely come up with a black screen, and the interface for Teknoparrot likely won't display at all. So it's in your best interest to download DirectX as well as Visual C++. And Visual C++ is going to take you to Teknoparrot. If you just download this on the tab, which I'm clicking on there, and I'm going to download it from the server Teknoparrot. If you're in the States watching this, then you're quite likely going to get a faster speed using a United States server. Okay, so I've got all my files. So I've got all 3 zip folders just here. So I've got the Visual C++ zip folder, I've got the TB Bootstrapper, which is Teknoparrot, and I've got DirectX. So what I'm going to do first is open up DirectX zip folder. So what I'm going to do with the DirectX folder for now is just create a new folder on the desktop. So right click and go to new folder and call this whatever you want. I'm going to just call it DirectX. And if we go back into that zip folder where the DirectX files are, Control and A, and that's going to highlight everything. Just left click on any file just there and drag it into your DirectX folder or whatever you've named that folder. Okay, so once that's been copied over, we're going to go into DirectX folder. And if you just scroll down within this folder where we've just extracted all these files, you're going to find an executable file. This is dxsetup.exe. If you double left click on this, that's going to bring up a setup installer for DirectX. So I accept the agreement, next, and next again. And this is then going to start installing all the components for DirectX. So DirectX gives us visuals, and like I say, there's a good chance if you don't have this installed, Teknoparrot won't display anything. As you can see, it's now copying files, all the .dll files, into a particular folder on our hard drive. That's good, that's what we want. And it's now ready to use. So we're now finished installing DirectX. So what I'm going to do is just delete that folder I've created along with the DirectX zip folder. So delete both of those, get them out of the way. Next up, we're going to look at Visual C++. Again, if we open up Visual C++, we're going to find lots of .x's in here, and there's a .bat file. The .bat file is going to install everything pretty much in one go. So again, just like DirectX, right click on your desktop, new folder, and I'm going to just call this one new folder because we're going to delete this in a minute. So highlight everything just like DirectX and move into that folder. And if we go into that folder, and like I say, if we just double left click on the install _ all.bat, Windows protected your PC, more info, and run it anyway. And this is going to start installing each one of these Visual C++ files. Okay, so throughout that process, you'll probably need to keep pressing yes. You'll keep getting pop-ups for each one of these to install. You'll have to do that around 10 to 15 times, but we got there after a couple of minutes. So now that we've installed Visual C++, we can also delete that folder, as well as the zip folder of Visual C++. And that's it, we're ready to go. So let's take a look at the Teknoparrot zip folder. So if we go inside, we got our contents in here. Now this time I'm going to create a folder, right click, new folder, and I'm going to call this Teknoparrot. And again, we're just going to highlight everything and drag it into that Teknoparrot folder. And we can now delete the tbbootstrapper.zip. So let's open up Teknoparrot. So first thing we're going to want to do is just double left click on tbbootstrapper.exe. This is an executable to open this. Windows protected your PC, click on more info and run anyway. Okay, so what this is going to do is just gather all the bits of files that you're going to need for this, and everything right now is saying not installed, required, strongly recommended. So what we need to do first of all before we go any further is at the top just there we got please select where you like to download Teknoparrot. So I'm going to make it install into this Teknoparrot folder that I've just opened up tbbootstrapper with. So if I go to browse, I'm going to go to desktop and just locate this Teknoparrot folder that I've created. And here it is. So just left click to highlight Teknoparrot, select folder. Next thing we're going to do is just go to full install. Everything is now installing and you'll see that the Teknoparrot folder is now beginning to fill up with new files. Okay, so finally Teknoparrot has downloaded successfully. Just press OK. First thing you're going to see, it seems like this is first time you're running Teknoparrot UI, that's user interface. Please set emulation settings, just press OK. Set up, do you want to add one now? Well, for this, I'm just going to press on no. And this is it. So this is the user interface of Teknoparrot. But before I go into this, what I'm going to suggest doing is just closing this down, yes. And what I'm going to do is create a new folder within Teknoparrot folder where everything's just been installed to. New folder, and I'm going to call this folder Games. Now for this setup guide, I've got 3 games here to test out and show you how to work these. So I've got Alest, BlazBlue, and Darius Bust. If I just drag those 3 folders into that games folder so everything's neat and together. Now before I go any further with this, if I go into games, I'm going to show the standard layout or structure of each one of these Teknoparrot games. If I go into Darius Burst, within your Teknoparrot games, you're going to find several different subfolders, so folders within a folder. And the file that we're actually going to execute from Teknoparrot Emulator is going to be the .exe. So that's what you need to be looking for. And if I go into another one of my games, into say BlazBlue, we'll find that this one's also got a .exe as well. Again, this is executable, which we can execute using Teknoparrot. And again, Alest. And in this case, we've got a slightly different one. This is Sengsin Alest. But as long as it ends with .exe, then that's quite likely going to be the file that we need. So next thing we're going to do then is actually open up Teknoparrot again, this time Teknoparrot UI.exe. This is the executable file that you need to open in order to get Teknoparrot displayed. So you have no game set up, do you want to add one now? Yes. So what we're going to do first then is just select our games from this list just here. So as you can see just a minute ago, I've actually got the game Alest. If I left click on that and then go to add game. So once this is opened up for your games, we're going to go to game settings. And at the top just there is game executable, and it's actually telling you in brackets which file it is you need to look. Now funny enough, that's the file I just showed you a minute ago. So what we need to do is left click and then locate that exe file. So again, it's going to be in my Teknoparrot folder, and it's going to be in my games folder that I created, Alest, and here it is. That's what it's asking for. So double left click, and that's now put that executable into place. Now under general input API, this means your controller. So if you drop this down, I'm going to be using an Xbox controller. It's quite likely going to work from X input. If you're using another controller and you find this API doesn't work, then it will be direct input. I'm going to select X input. And if we just go down to save settings, and what we can do next is go down to controller setup, and we can actually then map out controller. And this is going to be a good opportunity for you to find out if that API or input API is working for you. So in my case, like I've just used, it was X input. So there's a range of buttons we need to map out. I'm going to first start with start. I can then start mapping out my controller. So on start, I've got gamepad button 9. Now in terms of up, down, left and right, I'm going to use my D-pad to go up, down, left, right. And for your buttons, these are obviously going to be the action buttons. So your general controller has got 4 action buttons on it, say X, A, B and Y. So just map these out. And we've also got button 5, 6, 7, 8. So I recommend using your trigger buttons for these. And if you've got any buttons remaining, then you just map out the test and service buttons, which you might need at some point whilst you're in a game. Okay, so once you finish mapping out, obviously go down to save settings. Next thing we're going to do is say update available. So to update Teknoparrot, which gets a lot of updates, it's a very active development team, is we're going to go to install updates. And let's just go down to update. So what I'm going to do to launch my game just here, I'm going to just go down to launch. Okay, so in this instance, we're getting an error just here. What this is doing is telling us to use the actual website for Teknoparrot. So if we go to online profile, from here, we then need to make an account. So register as a new user, then just type in your email address and a username and a password. Okay, so once you've done that, what we're going to find next is that we've actually got some ID, online ID. And this is what Teknoparrot was asking us for. So if we now go back to Teknoparrot, we need to go to game settings. And just here, we're going to find general APM3 ID. So what we need to do is just copy this code that Teknoparrot has just given us. So copy, and then just pop this by Control V into that space, save settings. Successfully saved lsd.xml, that's good. So what we're going to do next is launch the game. And here we go. So this is how Teknoparrot games load. Bring up a little terminal, and it's just loading from that .executable which we've linked up to the Teknoparrot emulator.
N2 先人アレスタキーアサインプレイするゲームストーリーゲームカジュアルモードドラマチックオンにします戦闘シミュレ操作タイプをアシストリーダーを選択してください選択したリーダーのスキルは頑張れ皆さん、作戦を開始です。マイナス力を上昇させます。皆さんに止められますか
And to exit out of that, I've just pressed escape button. So what we're going to do next is actually set up another game. So this time, I'm going to go to those 3 horizontal lines at the top and go down to add game. Now this time, as you know, I've got a couple more games. So let me just remind myself, if I go to my games folder, I've got the BlazBlue game, which is Chrono Phantasma, and I've also got Darius Blue. So this time I'm going to add BlazBlue. So if I just look down on this list for this particular game, so here it is, Chrono Phantasma. If I just left click on that and add game, and I need to go down to game settings again for this, and game executable at the top. It's always important that you link this up to the executable which I showed you earlier. Just left click on it, and then I'm going to go back into my Teknoparrot folder, into my games folder. And from here, I'm going to go to my BlazBlue folder, and here's my game.exe. So double left click. And you also need to set your input API just here. So I'm going to leave this as direct input. I'm then going to go down to save settings and controller setup. And again, we can now configure our controller to use for this particular game. So in this game, we've got coin 1 and coin 2. So obviously this is a 2-player game, but I'm only playing this alone. So no one wants to play with me. So what do? So coin 1, I'm going to map this one out as say left analog stick down. Player 1 start, I'm going to use my equivalent of my start button on my controller. And you've now got the player 1 up, down, left and right. So I'm going to just use D-pads for these. And again, we've also got those action buttons. So once you mapped out, just remember to go to Save Settings. And this time we're going to go to Launch Game. And this one boots in straight away. So remember to close out and pressing Escape. What we're going to do is actually turn that into full screen. So generally you can do this within Game Settings. You'll find just here General Windowed is actually checked. If we uncheck this and save and launch game again. Okay, and finally we've got one more game to add. So as you can see, as I'm adding my games, we're now developing a list just here. So obviously we need to go back to the lines at the top, add game, and this time I'm going to go down to Darius Burst, another Chronicle. If I left click, add game, and we're going to go down to game settings again, game executable, and this one is saying that we need game.exe. So left click, we're going to find that Teknoparrot folder and go into the games folder, Darius Burst, and here's the game.exe is asking for, double left click. And here we go, so the same layout, we got windowed mode, so I'm going to leave this one unchecked because I want a full screen for this. And we've also got the general input API. I'm going to leave this as direct input and save settings. And we're also going to go to controller setup for this one too, and again it's going to be the same story, so obviously we're going to need to enter buttons for coin. And remember to save, and we can now launch the game. So that's it for today's Teknoparrot setup guide. So obviously in this setup guide, if you watch my original one from back in October, you'll notice Teknoparrot has changed, and perhaps this is why some people are struggling with it at the moment. So anyways, if you liked today's video, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. Also join me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. But until next time, stay retro.